as you can see, I have an Italian last name. I'm not like 100% Italian, but I'm a bit Italian, so I tend to talk with my hands and be a little bit animated. And if that finds me back here, I'll try to rein it in, and so you could hear me. So I know we just had lunch. I am almost in a food coma, but I'm trying to power through and get the energy and enthusiasm to come through the next section here. But I've been told that I do have a bit of energy and enthusiasm for the topic, so I think I'll try to channel that in the next half hour. So yeah, what I'll be speaking about is, I gave a little preview on one of the many programs that we run through the RDN's Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Program. And I've been working with the program since 2011. And I think it's safe to say we've really come into our own in that time. And there's some really great things that I want to share in terms of the model that we're employing at the regional district level, how we came to be, how the program came to be, and some of the success stories that we can share about our collaborative projects. So our region, I know I started my last little section with that, but I wanted to bring this up again. So our region, the Regional District of Nanaimo, is on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish First Nations. It's comprised of 7 electoral areas and 4 member municipalities. So we've been through all this before, but that's a good map to sort of splash up what I would call is the jurisdictional boundaries. Now in terms of water provision or water purveyors, so where people get their tap water from, in our region, each municipality provides drinking water to their residents separately. So we've got separate drinking water systems, one in each of our municipalities, so Nanaimo, Lanceville, Parksville, and Qualicum Beach. In the electoral areas, the RDN operates 9 small systems spread out in some of the electoral areas. Improvement districts provide water also in waterworks districts to places within the electoral areas, but a lot of people are on private wells. And so it's suffice to say that within our region, we rely heavily on groundwater for our community water supply, as well as surface water. So the next boundaries I'm overlaying on the map here are what we call our water region boundaries. So the idea here is that, watersheds, the way water flows, ecological boundaries, it looks different than when you lay the jurisdictional or political boundaries on a map. And so for planning purposes and for sort of the conceptual purposes of packaging our region into sub-regions or water regions based on water flow, we look at it as Big Qualicum Water Region, Little Qualicum Water Region, French Creek Water Region, Englishman River Water Region, Nanoose to South Wellington Water Region, Nanaimo River Water Region, and Gabriola Island Water Region. And so to point out here, it's essential to understand that water is not confined to those political boundaries. Water is not just truncated at the City of Parksville district or municipal line. There's the upstream area of the electoral areas that all flow downstream into the coastal municipalities. And so it's important to manage our water and understand our water resources on this regional scale. And so that's the purpose of sort of laying those water regions on the map there. So we've heard this word assets, it's come up throughout the discussion, throughout the symposium, and I think it's really important that we do use that language when we're talking about our watersheds, because they truly are assets to our communities. Watersheds are essentially the area of land that we live on. It's an area of land that drains to a common artery or common river or creek, right? So no matter where you are, you're in a watershed. You might be in the upper watershed if you're standing up on Mount Arrowsmith. You might be in the mid-watershed if you're in the Arrington-Coombs area. And then you'd be in the lower watershed if you were on the beach at Rathtrevor, for an example, if I was talking about the Englishman River watershed. So watersheds are assets in the sense that they provide our community water supply, so our drinking water that comes out of the taps, that's essential for our communities. But beyond that, they provide our ecosystem values, and they provide recreational opportunities and spiritual and cultural values as well. So I think anyone from our region, if you got into a conversation with them, what do they like to do? What are they passionate about? What do they like about where they live? I think if you talk to them long enough, you would hear something about water. It's a really integral part of our communities and our quality of life on Eastern Vancouver Island. So while our watersheds are really important assets in our communities, they're under stress at the same time. So we can look at some stressors kind of tipping the scales in terms of climate change impacts. So we have a photo there of Martindale Road that's subject to pretty much annual flooding that's actually getting worse when we're seeing these short duration, really intense rainfall events. And then beside that, you see the other end of the spectrum, which is trying to capture the idea of winter drought, or the reality of winter drought. When this is winter of 2014, I believe, and that's Mount Arrowsmith, and it was record low snowpacks for our region. And what that translated to was in the coming summer months, wasn't that built up water storage that we like to see and that we rely on by having snowpack. So that, the impacts of floods, but also of drought within our region due to climate change impacts. We're also a growing region, a great place to live, lots of folks coming to enjoy what we have to offer here. But again, that does put stress on our environment, and it results in land use change, so more development going on, as well as there's resource extraction and other activities that are constantly, changing our landscape, and that results in, watershed stress in some instances. So if we have the one scale tipping over here with the environmental stresses, how do we manage that and tip the scales and get back into balance? And there are management challenges in the sense that, it's limited resources. Any one agency isn't resourced enough to handle anything on their own. And we recognize that. And that is something that is a really big central piece to managing our water resources in the region, is looking at what can we do with limited resources. And the answer has always been, let's leverage partnerships, let's collaborate, because what we have together is much greater than we have if we go it alone. So looking at these stresses, I have to point to the foresight of the Regional District Board in the early 2000s. So understanding the stresses of climate change, population growth, rapid land use change, and realizing that we don't really have enough information to truly inform the best decisions in our region at that time. The Regional District Board put their heads together and said, we need to come up with a way to address these stresses. And that was at the point where the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Steering Committee was formed. And again, it comes back to collaboration. So the steering committee had island health representatives, municipal representatives, DFO, we have, community members, we've got, provincial agencies all coming together to say, well, how can we address, the stresses that we're seeing and actually, actively pursue these strategic goals that were identified by our regional board to maintain healthy and adequate water supply, protect water quality and ecosystem values, and encourage innovative regional planning. So how do we do that? Well, that steering committee, through their work and with the help of Lanark, who are the consultants working on that project, developed over time, many years of hard work, but good work, came up with the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Action Plan. And so this is a document that kind of lays out a roadmap to say, okay, if we want to address better understanding and protection of water supply, better understanding of ecosystems and protection of ecosystem values, and really innovative planning for the future of our region to be prosperous, both economically and environmentally, here's a great plan of how we can do it. But then it begs the question, okay, great plan, how do we implement that, right? We don't want this to just be another plan that sits on the shelf and is a good read, but what's actually happening? And so this is also another piece of foresight where it's like, okay, let's put our heads together and come up with a way to meaningfully implement this good work. And the solution there was to come up with a regional service. And to do that, there's certain ways to do it, but the route that was chosen was to go to the electorate through referendum and ask the population, would you be willing to pay into a regional function that directly works on drinking water and watershed protection? And so in 2008, and I'll point to John Finney because he was integral in this as the general manager of the Environmental Services Department at the RDN at that time. And so it's risky. It's like, okay, you're going to the electorate, you're putting a referendum question out there, yes or no, and this is like a pivotal moment. And so, with a small margin, granted, the answer was yes, But that gave the RDN the ability to establish a parcel tax funded service to fund the implementation of this action plan. And just to give you an idea, it's about $8 a parcel, and it's paid into by all 7 electoral areas, as well as all 4 member municipalities. And so that really kind of exemplifies the watershed approach. It's not just the RDN, it's not just the city of Nanaimo or Parksville, it's like we're all working on this together because we share the same watersheds, same aquifers. And so when you look at our action plan, you know, there's a lot in there, but I often distill it to these 3 key pillars. It's education, so the awareness building, the outreach within the community to understand more about our water resources. It's the science, it's collecting the data, doing the monitoring, performing the studies to better grasp the dynamics of our watersheds and our aquifers. And then on the foundation of these 2 elements, education and science, we are then better able to inform planning decisions, policy decisions, right? And so I nest them like this in this nice smart art. Thank you, Microsoft. But the reason I nest them this way is because I see them as very integral to each other, right? You can't have one without the other. And they strengthen and complement each other, these elements here. And we can deliver these things in a nested way through our service delivery as drinking water and watershed protection across the region. And so this is something I've come to discover through our work is that our program, it seems to be a bit magnetizing. It draws partners in. And that's really interesting to me because I don't think, we never really necessarily set that out as like, we want to be a magnet for partnerships, but really that's what it's turned into. And I think part of this is because it shows commitment. It shows that the regional district is committed to a long-term plan for drinking water and watershed protection. It's not just a 1-year, grant-funded initiative that can do good work, but really when you look at our watersheds, our aquifers, our ecosystems, you need to look at the longer view. And by having a regionally funded service, it demonstrates that political support and the importance for these issues. And it's able to bring in and leverage contributions from provincial government, from stewardship groups and community groups. Municipalities, of course, pay into the program, from industry, forestry, federal government, so Geological Survey of Canada has brought project work to our area, magnetized through our program, academia, school districts. And so it's this durable, long-term funding source that demonstrates our commitment, but also shows, we don't think it's just up to us in our program to go and single-handedly. It's like, no, we will come to the table and we'll come with resources, but it also attracts, the other players, and we realize we all have something to contribute to water sustainability. So our program's called Drinking Water and Watershed Protection on Purpose. It's a pretty long name sometimes, and talking about acronyms earlier, that's one of them, DWWP, but it's on purpose because we didn't want to neglect drinking water for watersheds, and it's trying to capture both the community water side of things, but also the ecosystem value, right? So drinking water and watershed protection. And if we think about water-centric planning in general, there's these elements that come together. So it's looking at water supply for our communities, but also habitat values, aquatic ecosystems, and also the cultural values of our waterways, the land use impacts on our water, and then the stormwater and the drainage elements. So there's lots going on. But that is why we need to nest with these different partners, whether that's the province, First Nations, industry, and municipalities, to tackle such a large scope of issues and topics. So I like this illustration. Normally you see that sort of overview map, but this is an illustration of our region, kind of truncated there, just looking actually at the Nanaimo River. And you can see the Millstone River faintly in there as well. But what I'm just trying to illustrate with this drawing here is that, our landscape covers all these spheres. So I could say, okay, yeah, we've got land use going on here. There's the cultural values nested in the landscape. You can see the water supply for the city of Nanaimo up at Jump Lake and South Fork Dam, which is actually outside of the watershed that the city's footprint is within. So we're in the Millstone River watershed right now, but the drinking water comes from outside of this watershed in the Nanaimo River watershed. So even just there, it's showing that cross-jurisdictional nature of our water. And what we do on the land matters. So this is kind of picking up on a thread that Kim has really instilled. So I'm halfway through, kind of built my kind of context. And now I'm just going to kind of frame with this is my bit of my thesis statement, and then I'm going to go into a little bit of the specifics of our collaboration successes. But I've loved this topic of restorative development, but I really think where we're at right now is actually restoring. Oh, and it's cut off. That's okay. So to get to restorative development, I really think we need to work on restoring, and in some cases initiating, healthy partnerships. And once we restore those partnerships, that gives us the foundation to do this innovative work on restorative development. So meaning not just preventing damage, or not just protecting, but enhancing and providing more cumulative benefit. I think that's a great thing to aspire to, but there's no way you're going to achieve such a lofty goal without very healthy, restored, and sustainable partnerships. And that's what we're really focusing on with our program. So I'm going to list off a few of our success stories. The idea kind of building off of this hard work of hope. It's been really hard to establish these things. It's taken time. We're about almost 10 years into our program, so we actually have a lot of great things to report out on. It's been hard work, but I think it really inspires hope for what we can do when we work together. So first off, I just want to highlight that steering committee I mentioned in the formation of our action plan is now actively our technical advisory committee that helps oversee our implementation of the Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Action Plan. And so it's a laundry list here. I know it's just text, but it's to illustrate all the players that sit around the table and contribute guidance, oversight, their expertise, for our regional initiatives on education, on the science, on the policy and planning. So some key initiatives to highlight under science and monitoring. I spoke this morning in our 5 to 10 minute short presentation on the Community Watershed Monitoring Network. So I won't go into too much more detail here, but the key message being that through collaboration with stewardship groups, the province, and private forestry, we're able to really expand the data set we have on surface water quality in the region. A key update I wanted to share is that we have up to 7 years of data from some of these sites, and we're taking the entire data set from 2011 to 2017, and this year we're engaging in a trend analysis for that entire data set, so working with consultants to look at the trends in the different creeks and watersheds in terms of water quality, but also overlaying land use change information and data, precipitation and climate data, and stream flow data for really a holistic look at, okay, here's our big data set, what are the trends we're seeing in the creeks and rivers across our region, and resulting from that, what are some recommendations moving forward in terms of planning and policy, in terms of targeted outreach, in terms of the whole suite of things that we can do to address that once we have that analysis. So I know that was mentioned, it's like you can collect the data, but you also need to do the analysis, do the interpretation so it translates to something on the ground. I've also been getting questions about, oh yeah, it's good about surface water, but I haven't heard anything too much about groundwater today. So I will point to, we are doing some really great work in terms of expanding our groundwater monitoring in the region. And we've been able to expand the provincial observation well network from previously 14 monitoring wells within our region. We added an additional 16 through our program. So we were able to get grant funding to support that between 2011 and 2013. So an additional 16 provincial monitoring wells. And further to that, so this is the stewardship and the community element, is we've worked with private well volunteers. So individuals who have private wells that are in target areas, send a letter, would you like to participate in our monitoring program? And we've been able to add 30 volunteer monitoring wells to continue to expand the monitoring of groundwater levels in aquifers across our region. And that then improves our understanding of groundwater in relation to surface water because the two are connected. Hydrometric and climate monitoring is another avenue we've been pursuing through partners, working with DFO and with Ministry of Forest, Land and Natural Resource Operations. I wanted to give a shout out to Lauren Fegan and Joe McCallum, two of our awesome staff people in the room who've worked on this program over the years. And I'm gonna make you guys stand up and give a wave, and most of you guys know them, so Lauren and Joe wouldn't be able to run these programs without them. All right. So science and monitoring, really important to get that data. But it's also really important to continue the engagement and awareness building within the communities. And so our program is also able to do that through, I was mentioning before, our Team Water Smart. So Lauren and Joe have also worked on that throughout the years. And that's through field trips, so taking students to actually see where their drinking water comes from in partnership with the forestry companies and with the municipalities. We're able to offer online resources, workshops, including workshops for well owners, so private well owners to understand more about how to maintain and protect their water source, again, through partnerships with Island Health and Ministry of Forest, Land, Natural Resource Operations. Also, a key element is our rebate programs. So it's good to provide information, but on top of that, providing incentive for action. So it's been proven, you can read a brochure and you can be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But that won't necessarily change your behavior if it's not addressing some barriers. So some barriers can be financial barriers, convenience barriers, those sorts of things. So we're trying to diminish those barriers in terms of financial barriers to encourage things like rainwater harvesting. So we offer rebate programs for residents installing cisterns for rainwater harvesting of 1,000 imperial gallons of storage and more, efficient irrigation upgrades, as well as well water testing and wellhead improvements. So all this foundation of education, awareness, the data and the monitoring leads us towards where we're really building towards with our program in the coming years, and we have moved in that direction so far as well, but that is the planning support and the policy advocacy. And so we can apply this local science directly to decision making at the local level. That might translate into information for our regional growth strategies, our official community plans, our policies, bylaws, development permit areas, so that we're taking a science and knowledge-based approach to policy. And also we can tailor those policies to the nuances of different areas. So we don't necessarily have to blanket one policy all across the region. We can say, okay, the aquifers and the streams in this part of the region have these characteristics and maybe require these types of policy interventions. So we can be more applied and more local in our prescribed policies and planning support. But it's not just at the local level. It's also through the provincial government as well, because they are the freshwater regulators. And so, I hear this, it's just downloading from the province. And, I would actually spin that around and say, we're not actually trying to take on what the province is doing. They're still the freshwater regulators. They oversee groundwater licensing. They oversee, setting water objectives, setting regulations for environmental flow needs and groundwater protection. But what we're doing as a region is saying, okay, those are the decision makers and these are the regulators for freshwater, and they're beholden to make decisions with the best available information. So we can advocate for our region by providing better information to the provincial regulators, so that therefore that translates into better decisions that affect our region. So it's kind of that advocacy role. If we were to step back and say, the province has got it, then we'd only have 3 water quality monitoring sites on the creeks and streams. We'd only have 14 monitoring wells. And there'd be a lot of neglected areas that wouldn't have that resolution of information and data, and therefore wouldn't have a chance of having better decisions made in those areas. So we really see it as, it's that collaborative piece. It's not about downloading. They're still a regulator. We'll leave that with you guys, but we will funnel information up so better decisions are made. In summary, yes. Okay, so in summary, on a foundation of public awareness, couple that with bringing in the local data and science, and we're better able to support decision making in a collaborative way, and that will support a sustainable water future in our region. So I mentioned briefly we are coming upon the 10-year anniversary of our program implementation. It was first implemented in 2009, following that successful 2008 referendum. And at this juncture, we're looking at reviewing and updating our action plan. And we're going to be engaging the public between 2018 and 2019 and working with the regional board and partners across the region to look at our program, look at the successes, what we've been able to do. But now we have the opportunity to build on that foundation, integrate the latest science, adapt to the new regulations and new situations we find ourselves in, and kind of take it to the next level. So I'd encourage folks like you who have the interest to come join a Water Symposium to look out for the public consultation we'll be doing on our action plan update, again, between summer 2018 and summer 2019. It's going to be exciting. So lastly, I want to just end on this slide, and it shows a little bit of a cross-section of the different projects we have going on, whether that's the creek monitoring with volunteer stewardship groups, whether that's working with private forestry and taking folks up into the watershed on field trips, or working with local municipalities and improving, our understandings of where the drainages are and what our understanding of water quality is and the aquifers and groundwater as well. And it's the collaborative process that really gets me energized. It's nice to see a lot of folks in the room that I hope to continue working with over the coming years. And thanks for the opportunity to present to you guys today. That's it.